Hello there. I'm delighted to say that I'm here with my very good friend Cameron John Robbins, the gentleman artist, and we are going to go through a series of Cameron's outstanding portraits of historical figures, modern and historic. And Cameron will talk about the portraits, what inspired them, about the individuals, the portraits themselves, how they came about. I will talk about them from a facial analysis perspective. So without further ado, let me bring up the first image to share.
Chef Gordon Ramsay, another one of my unfinished style portraits. I kind of painted him for my imaginary board of directors. I, years ago, really binged watched some of his TV programs, Kitchen Nightmares in particular, and binge watching them on YouTube, even in clips, but especially the full episodes, I felt like was a marvelous business education because when you get past all the drama and the swearing and the reality TV silliness, the patterns were always the same. A business, in his case, restaurants, because that's his field of expertise, a business starts failing and starts to lose its way, and they invite him in to help save the business. And there's always conflict, there's always huge amounts of debt, there's unsatisfied customers, there's unpaid bills. And he always comes in and he does the same thing every time. He says, he reminds them, look, your whole purpose for existing is to serve the customers. And you've started cutting corners and you've stopped paying attention to the details. And here's what you need to do to get back on track. And those that listen to him get back on track and start thriving again. And those that resist him don't. Because one of the patterns I saw over and over again, and this can be expressed, this is a human problem and can be expressed in any situation. But the reactions of the business owners to his advice and his criticisms and his observations, it was the same thing over and over again. They got defensive, they were resistant, they denied what he was saying. It was as if time and again they were saying, I'm in desperate trouble. You're an expert. Please come in and fix my business as long as you don't ask me to change anything. Like, what an absurd, impossible position to take. And yet it happened over and over and over again. It's like the first half or first three quarters of every episode is Gordon Ramsay confronting and contending with that intractable position. It's like, everything's going wrong, but I'm not wrong about anything. It's like, well, if everything's going wrong, you're clearly wrong about something. You're clearly doing something wrong. And it's really easy to understand when you kind of pull back. Somebody goes into business, it starts working, but things happen, whether there's a health crisis or an economic downturn or inflation or, whatever it is starts happening, they start getting stressed. The bills start piling up or, too much turnover. There's something going wrong and they start getting stressed. And because of the stress, they shift from seeing their employees as people they serve who are on their team and the people who serve their customers. And the only reason that anybody shows up to their business is if they serve well enough, to seeing their employees as customers as the means to an end, as the means for raising the money to solve the financial stress. And so the behavior changes and the outlook changes and the interactions change and their business starts dying. And the more it starts dying, the worse it gets. It becomes a negative feedback loop. And the only way out of it, out of that negative feedback loop is to remember, it's like, no. You as the boss, you as the leader, you as the business owner, your entire reason for existing in this context is to serve your employees to the best of your ability so that they serve your customers to the best of their ability. Because the only reason your customers show up is when they are served beautifully. And the only reason your employees continue to show up and give you everything they've got is when they feel served beautifully. That's the magic formula. But stress about money and bills piling up and all that, it kills the magic formula because we lose sight of what works and why it works. And so Gordon Ramsay, brilliant at demonstrating that problem and fixing that negative feedback loop. So I love the guy for that.
Okay, let's go to this image. Could have used your portrait, but I decided to go for a photograph instead because I wanted to show a couple of particular things. We know he's a combative figure.
Yeah.
Reasonably described as such. And when we see this little triangle here, where you've got a horizontal line across the bridge of the nose and then two lines going up to, it's not exactly a triangle, but it's pretty much a triangular shape here. So when you see that on somebody, this is somebody who attracts conflict. Again, going back to this idea, the Chinese idea of fate. It's one of those curious features that when you see that on somebody's face, and I've seen it on numerous people over the years, they attract conflict. There was a friend of mine in London many, many years ago when I was a student there, and a lovely, lovely guy, a small guy, and you would think, very peaceful guy, but he could go to the pub for a drink, and he could be sitting at a bar off to the corner. A row would break up. A row would start off over the other side of the bar, and somehow he would get enmeshed in it, even though it had nothing whatever to do with him. And it was just it's just like when you have that feature, it's just like there's a magnet for conflict. Not obviously desirable, but he obviously thrives in that kind of environment you've described, where people are at odds with each other and with the situation, and then with him. So it seems to work for him. It obviously works on a business professional level.
Right. Interesting what you're saying. I wonder if I want to make sure I understand a distinction, that conflict is attracted to them, not necessarily that they are attracted to conflict, as in they go seeking it out.
Oh no, they don't.
It just seems to have a way of finding them.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It's like
he's not going around looking where he can start trouble.
No.
Your friend wasn't going around looking to get into a pub row.
No.
It just somehow found a way to migrate across the pub and pull him into it. And he's sitting there going, what the heck, dude? This has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
And yet there he is and had to deal with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's one of those curious things. Like I said, I do not do fortune telling. I'm very, very clear about that. But there are a couple of features like that, like the hanging needle we talked about, and this triangle that, from the Chinese perspective, are just fate. There's one or two others, but they're two particular ones. A couple of other particular things I want to refer to here. We see these deep lines in the center of the forehead area, and people can have a number of lines, or in some cases no lines at all. I've got quite a collection, but where people have several lines, we take the three most prominent, if there are three. And in this case, I would regard this as being the middle line, and this would be the higher one. I know there is one further up, but I would regard these two, and this one here would be what I would regard as forming the bottom line. But this would be the middle one, and this is associated with self-understanding, self-knowledge. So this is a guy who does know who he is. He's been through a lot in his life. His big dream was to become a professional soccer player. It didn't work out because of injury. Now, whether he would have been good enough to fully make the grade, we don't know, but injury stopped it anyway. So he's been through a lot of, obviously there's been business failures as well. So he's been through a lot in his life, but he has come to know himself very, very well. So whether you like him, dislike him, he knows who he is. He's pretty clear.
Right.
this is me, this is me, and this is what you get. There's no,
Right.
obviously there's a persona for the TV program, but it's not actually far
There is.
removed from who he is. And one other
No,
thing
no.
which refers back to what you were talking about, Cameron, you notice the V shape, the hairline here at
Yes.
the top of the forehead. When you see that on a man, this tells you this is a guy who has a a deeply embedded capacity for problem solving, particularly complex problems. So problems, he goes into a situation where somebody, typically a group of people, are at odds with each other, or they've just been, maybe they're not even at odds with each other, but they haven't been able to figure things out. And he will go in,
Hmm.
he'll look at it and say, have you tried this?
Right.
And it's like he has a laser pointer to see what the nub of the problem is. Now, obviously, he
Hmm.
has a huge amount of experience at it now, but even prior to that, you could say that's precisely where he's expressing his, if you like, God-given talent.
You're right. It's a superpower.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like he just walks in and he gets it. Okay, this is what's actually going wrong.
yeah, yeah. And then
Okay.
you can tie that in with the conflict bit that he,
Right. Right.
yeah, he, you know, he's a magnet for it, but he's a guy who can thrive on it as well. And then you've got also this jutting chin. So yeah, like
Hmm.
bring it on. I'll deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just
I
again,
actually prefer I actually prefer the UK version of Kitchen Nightmares over the American version. They're almost exactly the same, except that I mean it's still, conflict and swearing and all that, but he was a lot gentler in the UK version, a lot more tactful, but American entertainment is always cranked up to 11. And so everything in the UK version is still the American version. It's just all the same stuff cranked up to 11 for dramatic effect, I suspect. So if you want a more accurate vision of what it would be like to work with him, I'd say look at the UK version versus the American version.
yeah, well, by tradition, I guess he would need to be more restrained in the UK version anyway. You know the old joke that the way the British way to solve conflict is to have another cup of tea. You know, anyway,
Okay,
that's coming from an Irishman, but yeah.
absolutely fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.